So you just picked up the Sony a7 IV and you're wondering, how do I get the best video image out of this camera? Well, in this video, I'm going to go through all of my settings, walk you through the entire menu system on the video side, and show you exactly how I have my camera set up to maximize my video output. Go ahead, grab your a7 IV and let's get started. All right, so first thing you want to do is turn your dial to video mode and put yourself in manual settings. This is going to allow us to maximize the camera and get the most that we possibly can out of the video side. First thing we want to do is go to image quality and we're going to go to file format. You have 5 different options here: XAVC HS 4K, S4K, SHD, SI 4K, and SI HD. So what are the differences? HS 4K, that is going to be the 265 codec. It is going to be the most compressed codec. It's going to give you the smallest file sizes, but your computer may have difficulty running this codec. If it does, then you want to switch down to XAVC S4K. This is the standard Sony codec that has been used now for multiple years. The HS 4K is what I currently have it set up in. If you're looking for HD video, you can definitely go down to SHD. And if you're looking for the absolute best video quality that you can get out of this camera, now these are going to be massive file sizes. You're going to want to go to the XAVC SI 4K, and that is going to give you the best codec possible. The difference between SI and S is that with S, it basically predicts what the next frame is going to be, and it kind of creates that image. It uses the camera's processing power to try and figure out what's going to be coming next. It kind of predicts what the next image, what the next frame is going to be, because only thing that video is, it's basically a number of still images stitched together, and that's what gives you video codec. So if you use SI 4K, that's going to record every single frame. It's going to be the less compressed, and it's going to give you the biggest file sizes. So I go ahead and use HS 4K. I have a pretty powerful computer, so I'm able to process the image without a problem. Going down to movie settings, I shoot everything in 24 frames per second. If you're looking to shoot in 30 frames, you can definitely do that. And for my recording settings, you have 5 different options here. I like to use the 100 megabits. That's going to give me the most room in post to do color grading. Now you have 422 10-bit or you have 420 10-bit. Now if you're doing a basic talking head video like this, you could get away with 420 10-bit without a problem. But if you want the best image quality possible, 422 10-bit is going to be your best option. So that's what I have it set up as. If you're looking for some 8-bit codec, which you can still do a great job with, for example, I'm shooting right now my Sony a7C, which only offers 420 8-bit. So if you want that option, then that's going to be an XAVC S 4K. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and pick 4K at 422 10-bit. All right, move down to S&Q mode. So we have a couple different options here. If you're looking to do some time lapses, the way you can do is you can go 24 frames per second or 30, depending on which one you prefer. And you can do 1 frame per second, and then you can get up to 100 megabits at 422 10-bit. It gives you the same options as your 4K video. So this is going to be 24 times quick motion, but we're going to get more into S&Q settings in a little bit. So let's go ahead and move on, and we'll talk about S&Q mode down the road. Proxy settings, this is if your computer is struggling to make proxies. You can always do proxy settings on. I'm not sure though, I haven't tested it, but I'm pretty sure that it would turn off the eye auto tracking in video. I usually leave this off, but it can help speed up your workflow if you got a slower computer that has a difficult time making proxies. APS-C mode, I leave this on auto. Basically, if I put on an APS-C lens, I want the camera to be able to determine that it's an APS-C lens and automatically make the adjustment. It goes right into crop mode. I'm totally fine with that, but if you are looking to change that, feel free to pick the one that works for you. Lens compensation, I leave shading and chromatic aberration on auto. I don't touch those. You can change your distortion comp to off or auto. I leave that off. And breathing compensation, this is a nice feature that's brand new with this Sony a7 IV. Basically what this does is with specific Sony lenses, it will crop in at 1.1 times. And what it will do is that breathing that you sometimes see when you're doing focus pulls, this camera does a great job of trying to eliminate that. So this way you don't get that hunting in the background. I go ahead, leave this off normally, but we can definitely set up a custom menu button for this option, turn this on and off very quickly. All right, moving on, formatting. This is if you want to format your cards, you can go ahead and format here. If you want to record media, basically what I do is I do redundant videos. So basically I'm recording to both cards at the same time. Why do I do that? Because I don't want a card failure to happen and I'm stuck without the video. I have simultaneous recording set for both of these, for both stills and for video. And if you want image quality, so right now, because I'm in video mode, everything is set up for JPEG, but it's not going to take any still pictures anyway. So in stills mode, I have this set up to raw. All right, so recovery image DB, I just leave that alone. Same with display media information, gonna leave that alone as well. File settings, here's where you can change the name of your files. Basically, you can have it by series or you can reset it. You can reset the counter right here. File name, you can go either standard title, date, title, date. I just have mine on title. And then my title name, I have my A74-. And here's the deal, you can put in up to 5 characters here. So basically, I'm naming all of my files using the A74. This way I know exactly what camera shot the image. Moving on, exposure control, I just leave this one alone. Moving on to the next one. If you're going to set your camera up like me, I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the best options, but this is where you can use that 1, 2, and 3 dial. Camera set memory. This is where you can go in and you can set your memory. For example, I currently have my camera set up for slot 1 to be 1/50th of a second, shooting 24 frames per second, f1.4. ISO as low as it will go. We'll talk about all the settings, but you can go ahead and save all your settings right here. And where do you want to recall them? Memory slot 1. Now, if you're going to be doing any live streaming and you want to use the USB stream, here's where you can use it. You can use 1080p, 60, 30, or 720 at 30 frames. If you don't have a fast enough computer, then unfortunately it will stream at 720p. There is a better option. I would recommend going out and getting a Elgato Camlink 4K or the HD 60. I'll go ahead, I'll link a couple options down in the description below if you want to check that out. It's going to be way better to have a dedicated video card when doing a streaming option. You can also record while USB live streaming. I have this disabled. If that's something that you're going to be using, feel free to turn it on. Then you can hit the record button and it will record the video while live streaming. Silent shooting mode, I have this off generally. This is more for a stills spot versus a video spot. Release without lens, I have that enabled because sometimes you may want to just take your lens off while the camera's still on, and that's totally fine. Anti-flicker settings, this is where if you're, let's say in a gym or something like that nature, you're shooting some high school basketball or something like that, you may get some weird banding. Here's where you can turn on variable shutter, and then that's going to release the shutter set. You can dial in your shutter setting to whatever you want it to be, all the way down to 1/50th, but you can go as high as you absolutely need to, all the way up to 8,000, 1/8000th of a second. That's what you have if you have weird banding or weird flickering going on. Another spot that this might be good in is if you're shooting a wedding and they got some weird LED lights or something of that nature, you can turn this anti-flickering on and try and get rid of that weird flicker. Audio recording on. You're shooting video. You want to make sure you capture audio. Audio is 50% of the video. So let's make sure we have that on versus off. And, right now I do have it set at 11, but test out your shotgun microphone or whatever microphone you're using. You want to be able to go in here and dial in the settings. I generally shoot for -20 to -12. Where those green lines are bouncing, it's a little bit low right now, but it's getting the job done because what I'm doing is I'm capturing the audio from here and on the camera. I'm going to sync them up in post. Auto timeout, I go ahead and leave this at live. Wind noise reduction, definitely keep that off. Otherwise it's going to sound like you're underwater or you're muffled. It's going to sound like you're talking like this. You don't want that at all. Go ahead and turn that off. Shoe audio, just leave that alone. And audio level display, yeah, you want to see what your audio is doing. You don't want to just go ahead and record and think you're recording with audio, but then it doesn't. So time codes, just leave it alone. Steady shot, off, standard, and active, depending on what you want to do. Now, if you go active, it is going to crop into your image a little bit. That is going to give you the most stable footage possible, and it's going to work with most lenses. If you have a lens that has OSS, optical steady shot, this is where if you have standard steady shot on, it's going to help with that. But right now, I just keep it at off. I don't want any extra cropping while I'm shooting. I actually have a programmable button that will turn it on and off. Steady shot adjustment, leave that alone. Focus length, leave that alone as well. Zoom options. Okay, so here we go. Zoom options. This is zooming in and out using clear image zoom. So I have this on clear image zoom. This is going to crop into your sensor at 1.5 times to give you additional reach on all your lenses. This is a great feature to have. Like I said, it crops in on your image and you're shooting in 4K 10-bit, so you shouldn't lose too much image quality when using clear image zoom. It does go up to 1.5 times. In HD, it can go as far as 2 times. All right, so fixed speeds as far as custom zooming in and out, I just leave these at 3. Same with remote zooming out. I leave that at variable and 3. I don't even touch those. So grid lines on and off. I like to have grid lines on my video. I like to know exactly rule of thirds and all that other stuff. So what I have mine set up to is digital and square grid. You can do rule of thirds, square grid, or you can do this diagonal plus square grid. I choose diagonal plus square grid. This way I can see the exact center of the image, and I can see outside parts of the image as well. In photo, it might make a little bit more sense to do a rule of thirds here. For video, I like diagonal and square grid. Unfortunately with this, whatever you pick, it's going to be for both stills and videos. You can't split this up. You may have to jump in and out of here, where you can set that up in your My Menu, which is right here. You can set up in the My Menu, where it's some if you're going to be utilizing it quite a bit. All right, so for emphasize record display, I turn that on. That puts a red box around the screen. This way you definitely know that you're recording when you see that on. Marker displays, I usually leave that off. Now, if you want to use like something like a 2:3 aspect ratio of some of that nature, you can definitely turn that on. You got a 4:3, you got a 13:9, you got a couple different options here. So sometimes you want to get that really compressed widescreen image. This is where if you turn it on, that 2.35 or this 1.85 to 1, that's going to give you kind of that squeeze down bar, so you know exactly where you can shoot without cropping out your image. So if you're trying to line up a shot, if you're using something that's super cinematic, super widescreen, maybe using one of these two options would be a good way to get your image to look a little extra crispy and to make sure that you're not missing anything in the shot. I usually leave this off. I leave all these off, grid frames, all that stuff. Sometimes it does mess around with eye auto tracking and other features, so I just usually turn it off. If I need it, I'll turn it on when I need to turn it on. Auto slow shutter, I just leave this on. ISO, you can change your ISO settings. I'm going to show you how to set up your ISO, so this way you're able to see your histogram while changing your ISO. ISO range, usually I just leave this at 50 and all the way up to a maximum of 128,000. If you're getting up above 128,000, your image is going to get real noisy. It might even get noisy all the way up here. I generally will not go up that high. I do like the camera, if I am in auto ISO, to have the flexibility to go up that high. I'd rather deal with a little bit of a noisier image than to have it be way underexposed. Auto manual switch, just leave this alone. So exposure comp, usually leave this at 0. Let's say you're somebody who constantly wants to shoot at like 1 or 1.3 over exposed because maybe you're shooting in one of the S-Log formats. We'll talk about that in a second. You can definitely set it so that your camera will always go to 1 stop overexposed. Now, exposure settings, I usually leave this at 0.3. This is going to give you every third of a stop versus if you go to 0.5, it's only going to give you a half stop increments. Exposure standard, just leave this alone. All right, metering mode. I leave this at multi-metering, but you have a couple different options. You got standard, you got centered, you got standard spot, entire frame, you got highlights. I usually just leave this at multi-metering. This is going to give you kind of the best prediction of what your histograms are going to look like and what your image is going to look like. And I do want face priority in multi-metering. So what does that mean? Basically, I wanted to try and prioritize the faces when it's trying to expose the shot. So if I'm using some auto settings, I want the camera to pick up on the face and try and expose the face. Spot metering point, usually at center, or you can do focus point link. I usually just leave that at center. White balance, right now I do have a custom white balance on here, but this is where you can go through and you can change your different white balances depending on what you need to shoot. Priority for white balance, I usually leave this at standard. And the shockless white balance, you have 4 different options here. You got off, fast, average, and slow. I usually just leave it on average. This way, when you're going from one room to another, if you're using auto white balance, it's not going to just instantly switch. It's going to be kind of a slower, gradual shift. And if you go to 3, it's going to be real slow. So usually I just leave it on 2. D-range optimizer, I usually leave this on. This is going to give you a little extra oomph in your colors if you're shooting in the standard picture profile. Creative look, I usually leave this at standard, but you have multiple different options here. I just leave it at standard. Picture profiles. All right, so here's where I modified some of my picture profiles. These picture profiles are automatically set by Sony, but you can change them if you want. So right now I have the picture profile off. I do have PP1. I did change that to black level +3. I got S-Cinetone in here. I got the black gamma, leave that alone. Knee gamma, or knee, I got that alone. Color mode, S gamma, and then saturation +5. For detail, I leave that at 0. I know the camera might over sharpen things, but I'd rather have a sharper image than a blurry image. To me, that's what I do. So if you want to copy this PP1 setting, feel free to copy it. And then PP2, I do have set up to my S-Log 3. I got the black level 0, black gamma, neat, left those alone. Color mode, I got S Gamma 3 Cine, saturations at 0, phase at 0, all these things at 0, but then detail I have at level 0. Again, with this camera, I know it normally wants to go down to -7, but I've just found that the image is a little bit soft, a little bit too soft on this camera. I've definitely gone to level 0 on this. I'll deal with the extra sharpening. And right now I have picture profile off because I'm recording on my Ninja. Skin softening, I keep this off. I don't want the camera to try and make my face look plasticky. I mean, I have gorgeous complexion to begin with. I don't really need it softened, so we're good here. Zebra settings, I usually leave these on and I set them at 95. This will let me know when we get to an overexposed image. Focus mode, continuous autofocus, so you got continuous and you got manual. I usually leave it in continuous autofocus. Sony's cameras do a great job of really trying to capture the eye, so you got eye autofocus in this. Let's go ahead and use it. The speed, you got multiple different options here. I usually leave it at 5. Don't know why. 5 seems to be the best for me, but you have all the way from 1 to 7, 1 being the slowest, 7 being the fastest. But when you're doing that rack focusing, I don't know why, I seem to like the 5. Same thing with the autofocus subject shift sensitivity. I got this to very responsive. You can dial it down if you like. Right now I have the sensitivity at 5, but generally if there's a lot of people around, I might bump this down to 3. This way it will stay locked on to the person that I want it locked onto. Autofocus assist, usually just leave this off. Focus area, I leave this on wide, but you have multiple different options. You can go the zone, you can do the center fix, so it would only focus on the center. You got manual spot where you can use that joystick to kind of move around and pick the spot that you want to focus on. And then you have expand shot. I usually just keep it on wide. Generally for what I'm doing, that works the best. All right, focus area limiter, I leave all these on, but as you get a little bit more advanced, you can definitely pick the ones that work for you and you can turn off the ones that you don't need. All right, focus area color. I don't know why. I like the red better than the white. You do you. Which way do you want to go? Red, white. Feel free to pick the one that works for you. Circulate the autofocus. I leave this on don't circulate. Autofocus frame move amount. I leave this at standard. There's 2 different options. You have large, you have standard. I just leave it on standard. Face and eye priority and autofocus. I leave this on. You got a Sony camera and it's got great autofocus. Why would you want to turn it off? I leave that on. Now you have 3 different options here. We have human, animal, and birds. I'm a human, so I usually leave it on human. Now, if I'm shooting some animals, I'll go ahead and change it to animals. Or if I'm shooting some birds, I now have the option of shooting bird eye autofocus. I usually leave it on human. Subject selection settings, I leave all 3 of them on because at the end of the day, I want to be able to use all the autofocusing capabilities that this camera has to offer. Right and left eye, I just leave that on auto. Camera usually does a great job of trying to find which eye is important. Face eye auto frame display, I usually just go ahead, keep this off, and then register face priority, I leave that on. Let's say you're shooting a wedding and you got a bride and a groom, and basically what you want to do is register their faces. This way in a crowd, the Sony camera is going to try and pick up their face, ultimately get them in focus over somebody else. Sometimes it might be worth doing a register of each one of their faces prior to shooting a wedding. Focus mapping on and off. This is a really cool feature. If you're interested in finding out more about focus mapping, I did a whole video on that. I'll go ahead and link that up in the cards above and down in the description below, and you can check that out after this video. Generally, I have this off. I do use one of my function buttons to turn this on and off. Focus magnification, use this if you want. This is gonna magnify your image. So if you go into this, you can see exactly what you're focused on. All right, focus magnification time. I got no limit on this. So if it's gonna magnify it, I wanna see it, I'm gonna leave it. Now, you do have options for 2 and 5 seconds. I just go ahead and leave this on, no limit. In the initial magnification, you got 1 and you got 4 times. I just leave this on 1. 1 times is good enough. All right, so peaking display. This is if you're using manual focus, you can turn on peaking display where basically it will show you red dots on whatever object you're trying to autofocus on. Again, it's in that focus mapping video. Definitely check that out. But what I leave mine on is off, high, and red. Red's the best color for me, but you have yellow, blue, and white if you choose to. And you have high, medium, and low. I like high. All right, we're gonna go ahead and skip through the playback options. If you wanna go ahead, fiddle around with those, feel free to do so. We're gonna skip the green as well, and we're gonna skip down to your setup options. So area, date, and time, you got all that. Feel free to set up whatever language you speak. Hopefully you're not setting up some weird language. If you struggle, here's where you set it up. Area, date, and time, this is where you can set up all this stuff. NTSC and PALS, what is the difference? Well, if you're shooting in North America, NTSC is generally what you want to be shooting in. That's what most video lights are using. This has to do with flickering. Basically, different lights flicker at different frequencies. In North America, the bulbs in your normal household lights flicker at a certain rate, and that's what NTSC does. In Europe, they flicker at a slightly different rate, and that's where the PALS is at. When you're in NTSC, you have the option of 24 frames, 30, and 60 frames, along with 120. And then in PALS, you have the option of 24, 50, and 100 frames per second. All right, so if you're looking to save your settings, you can reset all your settings right here, or you can save them to a memory card. So you can save, load, or delete them. I'm gonna go ahead and leave these. So if you wanna try out my settings and then switch back to your settings, just save your settings first before you switch into my settings. And then you can save two different settings, so this way you can switch between the two. All right, custom dials, this is where I have things set up. So basically, I go ahead and set things up in photo mode. If you want to go ahead and copy my settings, here's what I have. Feel free to copy them. All right, so now I do have my dial set up a little bit different based on stills and videos. Basically, my shutter speed is set to the dial number 2, and I got my aperture set at dial number 1. Generally, I'm shooting at a fixed aperture, but I want to change that shutter very quickly. So I'm definitely quicker with my thumbs than my pointer finger. And then I do have my EV comp. Even though this camera offers you the ability to customize that EV comp, I keep mine set to exposure compensation. I don't know why. I haven't figured out what else to change it to, but I set it to exposure compensation. For number 4, I changed that to ISO. Why? Because when you change your ISO, you can still see your histogram when you're spinning that dial in the back. Now, because we are shooting video here, I do have these set up. So what do I have on my rear? I have number 1 set up to zoom. That's my clear image zoom, so I can zoom in and out 1.5 times. My AF on button, I changed that to gamma assist selection, so that basically turns gamma assist on and off, so I can get a good representation of what the image is going to look like after I put a color grade on it. Number 3 is my white balance. So this is so I can change my white balance very quickly. I got number 4 currently set up to manual focus and autofocus toggle switch. So if I hit that button, it's going to switch it to manual mode. If I hit it again, it's going to switch it to autofocus. Haven't decided if I'm going to keep this, but that's the button that I currently have set up for it. And then number 5 is where I have my picture profiles. 2 ends up following exactly the same button layout as my still photos. Feel free to leave those. 1, I still have that record button set up there. So the record button, I just left that alone. That's still setting up recording. And then number 2 is following my photos. So definitely take a look at those. And then same with the lens button, that's set up to a focus hold button right now. Here's where I switch things up in photo and video. So it takes a little bit of muscle memory, but this is the way I have it set up. So I have my aperture set to the back and I have my shutter speed set to the front. Number 1 is going to be, that is my shutter speed. Normally, I'm not messing around with shutters. I'm going to be using an ND filter or something of that nature to go ahead and change my shutter exposure. So I don't normally crank up or down the shutter speed. If I'm at 24 frames per second, I'm going ahead and I'm going to keep it at 1/50th. If I'm at 60 frames, I'm shooting at 1/125. If I'm in 120 slow motion, I'm going to be shooting at 1/250th of a second. So I don't normally change that. I usually leave that dial alone because again, I'm not super quick with the pointer finger. So I want that to be shutter. In the back button, I have that one currently set to aperture. So if I need to change the aperture and increase or decrease that depth of field, that's what this button's for. The rear custom dial, I still got that set up to an exposure comp mode. Again, not 100% sure what to set that to. And then the ISO, this is where you can see that histogram changing when you're changing the ISO. If you use the ISO button that's on the camera to change your ISO, you do lose the ability to see your histogram. All right, so custom keys, basically how it was set up with the camera is basically how I have it. So here's my FM menus. I'll run through these super quick. If you want to copy them, feel free to copy them. So I got my drive mode, then my focus mode going across. I got focus area, I got ISO, I got exposure comp, I got metering mode, I got flash mode, I got creative look. So this is where I can change from standard to neutral pretty quickly. I got my white balance, I got my steady shot, I got some image quality settings. So this is if I want to change from RAW to JPEG. Normally I'm just always keeping it in RAW. And then I got my recording media settings here. So those are my photo setups. For video, this is where I have my steady shot. I can turn it on to standard or to active. Focus mode, I got this set up for what area I want to focus on. I got my volume levels here, my focus mapping, so I can turn that on and off. My picture profile, so if I need to switch between picture profiles quickly. My zebra settings, this is my zebra display. Do I want to turn the zebras off? Maybe they're just getting a little distracting for the shoot. Turn that off. Here's my zebra levels, so if I need to change that. Peaking display, this is going to turn on that red autofocus peaking. If I need to switch between humans, animals, and birds, this is where I got it set up here. I got my gamma assist type here, and then I got my gamma assist. I can turn it on and off here. I do have that AF on button that will turn the gamma assist on and off as well. But these are my function menus. Feel free to copy them. Pause the video and copy them. All right, so different settings for stills and movies. I turned all of these on because I want to be able to change everything. I want my video to be customizable and I want my photos to be customizable, so I turn them all on. All right, so display screen setup, I usually turn all of these on whenever possible. Same thing with Finder, I usually turn all of them on as well. Record with shutter, this is really cool. I definitely turn this on. I know we got a dedicated record button, but record with shutter is so much easier. You can just hit that shutter button and away you go. All right, continuing on, my custom dials. This just takes you back into the same menu that we were at. All right, so my dial settings. So I don't even touch this. I just leave this alone. My AV TV rotate, just leave that normal. Lock operation parts, I just leave that off. Don't touch any of that. It's just gonna lock your camera. Just leave it alone. Touch operation, I leave that on because I wanna be able to touch the back of the screen and do some tracking. Screen reader, this is pretty cool if you want your camera to be able to read your screen. Here, I'll go ahead and turn it on.
Menu screen, setup tab, accessibility group, screen reader on, screen reader off.
That gives your camera the ability to read your screen. So select Finder or monitor. I usually leave this on auto because I want to be able to put my eye up to the eyepiece and it will turn the monitor off or turn it on when I pull my eye away. So I just leave this on auto. Monitor brightness, if you're outside in a very bright sunny day, you have the option of manual or sunny weather. The nice thing about this camera is that when you turn it on to sunny weather, it doesn't exaggerate the colors, it just exaggerates the brightness of the image. The screen on this is doing much better than previous Sony generations. Viewfinder brightness, just leave this on auto, and fine color temp, just leave that alone. Display quality, just leave that on standard. If you're looking for a little bit of higher resolution when you're looking at your photos or videos, go ahead and turn this to high. If you need your Finder at a higher frame rate, then go ahead and turn this on a high as well. Turning it on high will eat up some of the batteries. All right, TC counter settings, we're gonna leave that alone. Gamma assist, generally that's gonna be off unless you need to turn it on. We got that quick button, that AF on button that we set, so let's go ahead and leave that alone. Gamma assist, I usually just leave that on auto. It usually does a good job. It knows what it's shooting. S-Log 3, 2, whatever it is. Remain shooting display, I usually leave this is not displayed. And auto review, I don't want to take a picture and then have it show me the picture for the next like 20 seconds or something like that. So I just leave that off. Auto monitor off, I usually leave this to does not turn off, so just leave that alone. Power save time, I usually set this to 5 minutes. So if I leave my camera sitting for 5 minutes, it's gonna automatically turn the camera off. All right, so now if you want to do some power saving mode here, I leave this on power save by monitor. So basically when I close the screen, it's going to turn the camera into a power save mode. And when I open the screen, it's going to turn the camera back on. So I leave this at both lengths, whether it just opens and it returns, or you can power save when it closes, or you can turn this off completely. I leave this on both lengths because I want to be able to have the ability to open and close the screen and maybe turn the camera on and off. Auto power temp high, this is something you definitely want to turn on. Might be the most important setting that you change today. Make sure you turn that to high. Not to worry, it's going to give you this warning. You're going to be fine. I've never had a camera melt in my hands, so I think you're good. This way it's going to prevent your camera from overheating and shutting off on you. Volume settings, this is more for sound options when you're playing back. Just leave this alone. USB connection, just go ahead and leave this alone as well. Resolution, so basically right now I am shooting in 1080p because I'm monitoring on the Ninja. Normally I would have this at 2160, but because I'm screen recording, I want this at 1080p because I don't want this massive, huge file with a simple screen record that I'm doing right now. But normally you're going to want to turn this on 2160. So this way it's going to output 4K video to whatever monitor you have. If you are using the Ninja 5 Plus, it's ultimately going to give you 4K video monitoring if you're in 2160. So HDMI output settings, this is basically where it's going to record your screen or not record your screen. Output, this allows you to record through your camera and through a recording media like the Ninja 5. I currently have it set up to the output being at 1080p because I don't want a huge file here. Normally this is set at 2160. Time code, I leave that off, and then I just leave these other two options alone. But as you can see down here at the bottom, it does tell me that my camera is set up to record at XAVC HS 4K 24 frames, but my monitor is only going to record at 1080. Remember to change that to 21/60. That's going to give you the best output if you're using an external monitor. HDMI info, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm recording my menus right now. I'm going to turn this off after we're done, but normally this is off for me. You don't want to record something on an external recorder and then have all your camera settings on it, unless you're doing a tutorial where you're showing somebody what you used for camera settings. Control through HDMI, I leave this off. Video light mode, I usually put this on the power link. Anti-dust function, if you need to clean your sensor, you can go to sensor cleaning, and what it will do is it will like kind of shake the sensor and it allows some of that dust to come off. And then one of the other nice features with the Sony a7 IV is the shutter will come down when the power is off. Just don't touch that shutter. You're gonna be in a world of hurt if you do that. All right, auto pixel mapping, I just leave that on. Pixel mapping, I just leave that alone. And the version, this is where you can see what version of your lens and your camera. If you need to update your software, you'll know from here. All right, so if you made it this far in the video, you are a champ. Go ahead and give yourself a thumbs up. We have a couple more settings to go through, but right now I do want to say thank you. If you're liking this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and ring that bell notification so you're notified every time I post out a new video. Comment down below if there's a setting you want more explanation on, and I'll try and hit you up in the comments. All right, so we talked about programmable feature options, so I'm gonna go ahead and give you my programmable features for slots 1, 2, and 3 in photo, and then I'm gonna show you how you can get 10-bit 422 video in 120 frames per second. Little hack. All right, so first off, let's go back to image quality. Like I said, we're in 4K. The first setting that I normally set up is my frame rate at 24 frames per second. So at 24 frames per second, I want my shutter speed to be at 1/50th, and I want my f-stop to be as low as possible. So whatever your fastest lens is, go ahead and hook that up to your camera when you're doing this. Whatever picture profile you want to set. So for me, I will set mine to the S-Log2 that we programmed in PP2. I'm going to go ahead, leave the ISO at 200. I'm going to show you right now. See how you can still see your histogram when you're changing your ISO. That's the beauty of changing that back circle dial to the ISO. So now we got an S-Log3. We can go ahead, we can change our audio levels if we so desire. But once we have what we want, we're gonna go back into the menu and we're gonna go to shooting mode. We're gonna go to camera set memory and we're gonna pick number one. Number one, hit okay, you're good to go. Now we got 24 frames per second. We got 422 10-bit. We got the S-Log3 picture profile. Generally, I usually leave this on auto white balance, so I would change it to auto white balance. All right, so now let's say you want to set up your 4K 60. You're going to go into image quality again. You're going to go down to movie settings. You're going to change this from 24 to 60p. Now, if you notice, 30 frames per second is not available in HS 4K. If you want 30 frames, you got to go to either SI or you got to go to S 4K. Let's say you want 60p. This is going to put a little bit of a crop on your camera. We're going to go ahead, go 60p. Now you got a couple different options here as far as recording media goes. I usually leave this at 200 megabits per second, but you can also go down to 100 megabits if you need to save a little space, or you can go to 150 and go 420 10-bit. I usually leave it at 200 and we're good there. And then I usually keep everything else the same. So still using S-Log2. I'm using that custom picture profile 2 that I set up. Don't forget, you got to change your shutter speed. Going to change our shutter speed to 1/125th. That's going to give us the proper motion blur. Going to keep that f-stop as low as possible. Keep my ISO as low as possible. And then go into the menu, go to camera set memory, and I'm going to pick number 2. Now this camera does give you the option of going to HD settings. We can go to the movie settings and we have the ability to go to 120 frames per second. Now going 120 frames per second, you only get 8-bit codec options. You get 420 8-bit. This is usually what I set up in dial number 3. I got to change my shutter speed to 1/25th. Keep my f-stop as low as possible, ISO as low as possible. And then what I'll do is I will set this up for number 3. I will go down to shoot mode, go to camera set memory, and I'll set this up for number 3. I did promise you a way to take time lapses faster and to shoot 10-bit 422 video in 120 frames per second. So how do I do that? Real simple. We want to switch over to S&Q mode. So go ahead and switch your dial over to S&Q mode. And now that we're in S&Q mode, what we can do is we can go up to image quality. We can go to XAVC SI HD and go down to movie settings, and we go 24 frames per second, 422 10-bit. So when we go down to S&Q settings, we can go to record frame rate, 24 frames per second. That's how we're going to have the camera interpret the video after we're done shooting it. But frame rate, it gives you the option of 120 frames per second. And if you notice, it shoots in 422 10-bit. Now, here's the downside. The downside is you won't have any sound. But if you're doing super slow motion, 5 times slow motion, do you really need sound with that? It's going to sound all weird anyway when you slow it down. If you want to shoot some with sound, you have it programmed to your video option 3. If you're good with no sound, then S&Q is where it's at. Now, if you want to shoot a time lapse, you can go to 1 frame per second, and that's going to give you 422 10-bit as well for your time lapses. It's going to give you some crispy 4K time lapses here. How do you get a crispy 4K time lapse? Well, you can come up here, you can go to the XAVC HS42 10-bit, go back down to your S&Q mode, and here's your time lapse option as well. A couple different options for you here. I usually program my S&Q 120 frames per second to slot 1 and my time lapse to slot 2. If you have any questions or concerns, this was all about videos. If you're looking for me to do a tutorial on how to get the best still images, definitely do me a favor, comment down below with still images, and I'll know that that's code that you want to see a dedicated video to that. If you like this video, I'm sure you're going to like the video on the screen now. It's another video about the Sony a7 IV. Go ahead and click on that video, and I'll see you on that video next. Before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thanks for hanging out. It's been a long one, but I appreciate you, and thanks for watching.